This program is brought to you as a public service by Maui Causes. Maui Causes is a crowd-funded media production group that provides media production services to a variety of environmental and progressive causes here in Maui County. Visit us on the web at www.mauicauses.org. Welcome to another edition of Maui Causes. I'm Sam Small. Thanks eternally to Akaku for giving us the airspace and the studio space to be able to put on a show here for this community, to bring issues to you and your family members, issues that you're not likely to hear spoken about at all, really, in some of the other media, in most of the other media here in Maui County. Our local newspaper is certainly skewed towards protecting business interests. And those business interests here in Hawaii are particularly in control, shall we say. Hawaii leads the nation yet again in another important issue, a lifestyle issue, living under corporate control. The people living in the Hawaiian Islands have been living under a form of corporate control for a long, long time. Folks on the mainland are just becoming aware that they are living under corporate control. But here it's been institutionalized under the plantations, handed off to the military, handed back to the same companies that were in power before, and everybody thinks it's normal. Well, if you watch this show, the theme, that ain't normal, folks. What's going on here in Maui County is not normal. The structure of our local government is not normal. The structure of our local government needs to change. And the only way that that's going to change, well, it can stay the same. Let me rephrase that. If you want Maui to look like Oahu, then everything's fine. If there's a part of you that doesn't want Maui to look like Oahu, that doesn't want Maui to become that you don't want to live a life where your life is dictated by the traffic, because that's what people on Oahu live with on a daily basis. That's the quality of life that is headed here to Maui. We are at the tipping point. Our roads are already overcrowded. If you live on the west side, you know what I'm talking about. How many of you are structuring the course of your day around the traffic? Why? Is that to your best advantage? Is it to your family's best advantage? Are you able to read your kid to sleep at night? Or are you sitting in traffic? Which one is it? Are you able to provide an income for yourself and your family? Or are you sitting in traffic? Because if you're sitting in traffic, that's not to your best advantage. It's not to your children's best advantage. It's to the best advantage of the corporate powers, the construction companies, even, some of the unions. There's a power structure that dominates these islands. It has institutionalized, loopholes, shall we say. Let's be kind and say that there are loopholes in our local government systems. These need to be fixed because the way things are and moving in that direction will continue for as long as you allow it. And the way that it changes is by you stepping up to vote. You, your uncles, your aunts, your cousins, everybody who lives here, everybody who has a sense of what Maui has been always, and how wrong things are going here, how badly we're screwing this place up. Our reefs are dying. Tourism is overextending the carrying capacity of this island. Expanding our local airport into an international destination will bring an extraordinarily more number of cars here on the island. Allowing residential development, private developers to continue to exploit our permit system the way that they have for decades will continue to drive more upscale residences and commercial properties that we don't really need without roads to support. You know, there's 2.5 cars that go along with every residence. So if we're talking, 17,000 building permits, I think, are already in place. Nobody's corrected that number. If anybody has an appropriate number, please reach out to me. I've been told that 17,000 homes are already approved to be built. They already have their permits. They may have some other hurdles to go through. But basically, they're, going to be built. That's 45,000 more cars? Where are those cars going to go? The plantations have it, set up, so A and B's got it set up so that you can't even pull over to the side of the road on Maui. Parking spaces in Kahului are tighter than they were in Manhattan. Because every square inch is so valuable. And every square inch of access to the residents, the people, the Kanaka, the plantations knew they needed to take it all away, to give no inch, to give nothing back, so that their control, their domination would be complete. And that's the structure that we are living under here in Hawaii and on Maui. You're living in a structure that attempts to dominate you completely. You have no rights, you have no say. Through the loopholes and through the culture of just allowing the good old boys, acknowledging, well, the good old boys, they have their way of doing stuff, and we're just going to let it happen. They're smarter than us. They know what they're doing. Well, what they're doing is raping you. What they're doing is raping your children and the environment here. Short-term corporate profits. Used to be family money. It's not really family money so much anymore. It's now foreign national corporations whose mandate is to provide profits for their shareholders. It's actually a law. A corporation's first interests need to go to providing profits to their shareholders. So that means they extract every little bit of these islands for their profits at your expense. It continues for as long as you allow it. You change it by voting. You change it by being involved in the process. And through venues like this and a kaku and a community of people who care, who see what's going on here and understand that it needs to change, and because of our unique small size, we have the ability to do it. It's not going to take much. We don't need that many more voters, folks. If people step up, if you talk to your aunts and uncles who maybe they're not even living on Maui but all the time, they spend their time on the mainland, but they've got an absentee ballot. They can get an absentee ballot. That process is getting easier. You need to avail yourself of that process. And if you think that you're not voting because you don't want to participate in a system that you don't feel is legitimate from the start, well, I understand that. But consider, we are at this tipping point with this existing system. Our islands will no longer be what they are if we continue. So if sovereignty ever does succeed in some form at all, what's going to be left? There's nothing left. We need these changes, and these changes are available to us in this coming election cycle. Talk about these issues, educate yourself about these issues, and have every expectation of voting in the primaries and in the general election next November. Register to vote. Ask your family members to register to vote. We started something here in Maui in 2014. This show got started in 2013, leading up to the general election for the GM moratorium, to use the tools that are available to us, the public trust doctrine in the Hawaii State Constitution, to use that as a tool, as a mechanism to begin to have the discussion. I mean, we did really well. Monsanto they admitted to spending over $12 million in that election. And a local grassroots community rose up. We created the GM moratorium because of the need, of the exposure that you receive to chemical pesticides, experimental, open field, upwind of where you live. We have questions about that, and they are legitimate questions. You want to talk about loopholes, same kind of loopholes with the FDA, the EPA, the Department of Ag. Maui's got the same kind of loopholes. Planning Department, the Department of Finance, Corporation Council, same kind of loopholes, same kind of manipulation, and the same kind of change that's required. The tool to make that change is transparency and your vote. Vote for candidates, identify candidates who express a willingness to, drain the swamp, to clean house of, and change the structure of our government through the charter revisions so that the Department of Planning doesn't have as much autonomy. They are appointed individuals on the Planning Commission. The Planning Director is an appointed position appointed by the mayor to do the mayor's bidding, whoever the mayor is. If you got a good mayor, it's a good thing. If you got a bad mayor, what you may consider bad, then it's a bad thing, and it's a very bad thing. Because their ability to suppress issues, their ability to control the process at the top level of the corporate structure of our local government is supreme. Corporation Council is running this county. The people only have an option of suing. That's how things get done here. And Corporation Council is perfectly prepared for those lawsuits. It's actually job security, I think. They're lawyers. They like lawsuits. It's what they understand. And they're using it to control everything. They're using it to control the planning process. They're using it to protect, some of the things that may have gone on in the past that weren't so good and maybe even were illegal. They're suppressing the entire process. And that's not to your advantage as a community. As a community, that sucks. And it needs to change. And you'll be hearing much more of these issues as we go forward towards the 2018 general election, because these are issues that the candidates are not going to be able to ignore. So, Autumn Rae Ness has been sitting here through this whole rant. Thank you for your patience.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
I know that you have lived through and are living many of these things that I've been speaking about, and have made a tremendous contribution to this community and to the issues that that I've been talking about. Part of the reason that the 2014 GM moratorium was successful was because of the grassroots community that rose up around this issue of exposure in open field testing, and the legitimate question of what is this doing to the people and what is this doing to the environment. Right. And it netted out that we've been told that we don't have the right to ask that question. But we forced that issue, and you were very active in that campaign, especially in the community, real grassroots, door-to-door canvassing. And I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for that extraordinary effort to coordinate and take people door to door, because that's where the communication happens.
Right.
That's where that's really where the rubber meets the road in terms of outreach and community education. That people feel they feel your integrity and your understanding of the issues, and the willingness to go out and meet them on their doorstep and educate them. That's a huge contribution, and folks that are willing and interested in doing those kinds of things in the coming elections, please look for outlets. You reach us at Maui Causes. We're happy to direct you to on-the-ground grassroots organizers. Autumn, you're actually employed now working for Elle Cochran's office as an administrative assistant. So I don't know what your roles in the 2018 election is going to be. You probably don't know exactly yourself.
I'll be knocking on doors. The door knocking on doors for the 2014 election was one of the hardest things I've ever done, and also one of the most enjoyable things I've ever done. I personally knocked on 3,000 doors. So now, I've walked most of this island, neighborhoods that I never would have, that I have no reason to go into.
Right, sure.
And
going out of your way.
Yeah, and though I went to talk about one specific thing, I was able to hear the concerns. You used to go up on someone's doorstep. Sometimes they invite you in for water or a beer, and you end up chatting for an hour. And the conversation goes in circles, and I've learned a lot about my community and what people care about and what they have time to care about. And I learned a lot about, the hierarchy of needs. If someone is struggling and has to live with 15 people in one house to make ends meet, they probably don't have a lot of time or brain space, and they're raising kids and they have a job. They don't have a lot of time or brain space to think about how healthy our reefs are, or how our sewage system is affecting the health of the reef, or what chemicals are being sprayed in the yard next to them, because they're just trying to get by. So I learned a lot through that. Not only do we have this big thing to tackle with Monsanto and Syngenta and all these companies doing what they're doing, we also have to give people the space in their life to have the time to worry about that, have the time to be concerned about what's going on in their community, And so food, water, shelter has to be
basic needs.
The basic. We have to make sure our people are taken care of so that they can be active in their community and make sure that things are going the way that they need to be going, Side note. Sorry.
No. It's actually what we're segueing to.
Yeah.
It is the primary issues at hand, and I applaud your ability to be able to have the larger perspective, but yet the willingness to drill down to on the ground functionally what do people need on the ground. Functionally, what are the solutions that we need to be able to empower this community?
Right.
Because it's all about community empowerment.
Yeah, it is. And you can't ask people to take a look at the structure of their government and see if it serves them if they are worried about living in their car next week.
Right.
So I'm actually really fortunate to now be working for Council Member Elle Cochran, because I'm able to concentrate on ag issues. We keep an eye on A&B and Monsanto and what they're doing with water in our ag land, but also it gives me a venue to help her examine the pressing issues about housing and water availability for your residents, so that the residents can be comfortable enough to be active participants in their community. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Well, affordable housing is definitely something that you folks have been working on, and I would love to hear your perspective if we can jump right in.
Yeah, totally.
And talk about what you see as the base foundational switches to be able to actually provide affordable housing. Where are we at?
Well, the first thing I guess I'd like people to know is I feel the urgency and the pain of people wanting this thing to be fixed, the crisis to be fixed right now. I very much too am living my own version of the Maui housing crisis. Rentals don't come easy. people are paying, me included, over 50% of our income if we can find something for a roof
suitable,
overhead.
clean, healthy.
It's really crazy. So a couple of years ago, Ellie tasked me, Council Member Cochran, with examining this housing crisis. And I was looking, I like to work smart, not hard. So I was looking for maybe the one answer that would be the quickest and most simple solution. And there really isn't one. And I think that's why it's taken so long.
Yeah.
Because a lot of our legislators and people who are running our departments don't, either have the capacity or the time or, the ability just to pan out.
It's having that perspective, being able to get that perspective, because these are complex issues, and there is no one formula to be able to say, okay, 3 parts this, 2 parts that, and here's your solution.
And the housing crisis didn't happen overnight. It's a culmination of a bunch of layers of different policies and regulations and things, trends that layered upon themselves to create this. So undoing that in a way that's positive is arduous.
And some of them are not undoable. Hawaii as a state is locked into an entitlement system because of the federal courts.
Totally.
That, the federal courts mandated I don't know when it was, at a particular point in time, the federal courts just froze everything. And so the Supreme Court of the United States said to the states, whatever your level of entitlement is today, that's where it stays.
Right.
And Hawaii didn't have a residency requirement. You can, and we're on, there are websites that list, Maui and Hawaii as a place that if you're looking to live on the street, it's a good place to come.
Right.
And we can't change that because we cannot, the courts won't allow us to implement a residency requirement that you need to live here for a particular period of time before you're entitled to state assistance.
Right. Well, the good news is there are a lot of things that we can change. And I had the benefit of not just thinking outside this current box that we're in, but we just blew the box open.
Great.
Okay, so how did we get here?
Right.
What's broken? Let's trash that and start again.
Right.
So the interesting thing that the first box I had to blow open is that this county has been, what's that saying? If you repeat the way you do things the same time and you can't expect a different outcome. I'm sorry, I'm butchering it. Anyway, we're doing the same thing over and over again. We keep expecting that houses are magically going to get cheaper, and they're just not.
They're not.
Right now.
In fact, it's only going to get worse.
Yeah, the development community, and I'm not saying this with any blame, the development community, for better or for worse, has influenced the way that our housing policy and the things that are built, get built.
It is. It's a systemic thing.
Yeah, and right now, for some reason, our policymakers and everybody have gotten stuck in this is what the development community wants or can build. So how do we shove residents who are not making enough to afford that into this thing that the development community wants to provide? Right. So we flipped the script to the exact opposite. We are looking at our local workforce and what they make. What really do they make, and what can they afford, and how do we build that for them? We're not trying to shove people into rents they can't afford or to mortgages they're going to have to sell their cars for or screw their kids' college fund for. We're looking at really what does our workforce make, what should they be asked to pay, and we're going to find people to build it. That's what we have to do.
And that's that is exactly the process that's required here, because it's understanding it from a carrying capacity.
That's
perspective.
Exactly it. It's a math problem.
What are the structural, functional limitations that we have because it's a small island? And the same thing. What are the base human needs of our population here, and how do we craft a solution that's targeted for them? The existing systems are built to facilitate other people's lives, people that are not residents and are not living on these islands. And we need to change the structure of our government, of our entire approach, to facilitate the needs of the people who actually live here.
So I'll give you 2 examples of what we're doing right now. And we have a I have a chart on my wall in the office, and it's like all the different, it's like I think 12 different solutions that we have to check off before we can start providing real housing. And it was hard to prioritize which comes first.
I bet.
You know, but the two we put first were redefining, first of all, what is affordable. If we build a, you know, $400,000, $500,000 houses, that's really not, but that's what's affordable right now.
And
technically,
right.
in our law, that's what's affordable.
Right.
I'm not going to put, or Ellie's not going to put any effort between building a bunch of affordable homes.
Right.
So first, let's fix what's affordable. And you might know if you see an advertisement for an affordable housing development going up, and then you go look at what the houses are for sale for. Most people I know are tripping out because the lowest price, a lot of cases, is like $400, and that's the low end. There's like maybe 2 of those,
Right.
and then the rest of them are 5, 6, high 600s sometimes. You know, for a 3-bedroom house.
And the developer is trying to convince the community that
That's
is affordable.
Yeah, and then try going
And just
to the
because
bank.
the developer labels it affordable doesn't mean that it's
Well,
true.
and our own county code labels that as affordable. Our own county code is broken. So for a long time, we knew anecdotally that these numbers were too high, but
Right.
we were relying on HUD numbers. HUD is a federal organization, federal entity that sets affordability numbers based on, they come in and they look at the census and they look at your area median income. They say, okay, the median income for the area is X amount of dollars, so we're gonna call, based on that number, we're gonna make this affordable, and they go up and down from there, you know?
Right. Benchmarking.
Benchmarking. Well, we knew anecdotally that HUD's numbers were too high for a very long time, but only recently we've been able to prove it. Because if we wanted to take HUD numbers out of our law, we had to replace it with something else. And
Sure,
it
there's
can't
got to be a
something
scale.
that I made up.
You can't just make it, it's not Joe's rule here.
Exactly.
It's,
So just recently, our own Maui County Office of Economic Development published their yearly Maui County data book. And this, finally, the statisticians confirmed
gave some numbers.
what we know. And this latest data book was for 2016, but the census numbers are like a year behind.
They're always behind, yeah.
So, for example, right now, the 2015 HUD numbers for the county of Maui say that our area median income is $75,000, right? They don't define whether it's a household or a person. So if you're a single income household, you know, you got to be making 75 grand to be median,
Right.
you know? Anyway, our own local numbers published by our Office of Economic Development for the same year put our median household income for $66,000. That's almost $10,000 lower.
Right.
So that's a lot if you're trying to qualify for a mortgage.
Which percentage-wise, it's a high percentage of your income.
So we're working on legislation right now. It hasn't been introduced yet, but it's in the works to reset our Maui County Code to our own locally produced Office of Economic Development numbers, so that there's this little, you can't see it, there's this little like spreadsheet that they use that says what's available. If you're at 100% of median income, if you make $75,000, these are the houses you should be able to afford, right? Actually, our own area income is down here. So we want to move this whole graph down and start seeing more real affordable numbers. That's the first thing. The other thing we're trying to figure out how to work into law right now is, let's talk about workforce housing.
There's more to our show in just a moment. This program is brought to you as a public service by Maui Causes. Maui Causes is a crowd-funded media production group that provides media production services to a variety of environmental and progressive causes here in Maui County. Visit us on the web at www.mauicauses.org.
Let's talk about what our workforce really makes. You know, right now, $15 an hour for people who are working in the tourism industry is a decent salary. You know, and if you take that number, let's talk about providing what our workforce can afford, not what developers want to build, right? If we take $15 an hour at a 40-hour work week times 4.3 weeks in a month, that means our $15 an hour workforce is taking home $2,580 a month. And if you take the generally accepted notion on every level of government that human beings should spend a third of their income.
It is a common, that is, you know.
On their house whether it's rent or mortgage or whatever. That's what bank loans are set on, that formula that a third of your income is for your household.
It's a known sustainable structure.
That means at $15 an hour, 40 hours a week,
Right.
our workforce can afford $851 a month for rent.
Wow.
So
that's like half.
Exactly.
Of
our government, so this is what I'm doing on the daily and
Right.
what Ellie is doing on the daily, is trying to figure out how to provide either studio apartments for $851 a month, or like a 1-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, where each you could have a roommate,
Right.
and each room would be $800 a month.
Right.
You know, and that's fair. That's what our
Well,
workforce.
that's the target.
Yeah, and
that's
people
what we
who are-
need to be able to deliver to the community as a government, as a structure, so that the community can be sustaining.
Yeah, that's workforce housing, and that's what we're working to provide. The other really interesting thing is the 10-year strategic plan for tourism for Maui just came out. It's this huge 2-volume booklet, and I've just skimmed through it so far, but a couple of interesting things where they outline what people in the tourism industry take home, what their salaries are. And a hotel management is around 70 grand is what they say. But cooks, restaurants, servers, landscapers, housekeeping, all of that kind of labor in a hotel
People
or a
who
resort,
actually break a sweat.
make between $32,000 and $37,000. So the backbone of our tourism industry, which is what brings in the most money of anything else in Maui, is right now, according to HUD, at 50% of our area median income. So we should be providing homes for them. They should be the target of the low end. Right now, all of our affordable housing policies concentrate on like 80 to 120 of AMI.
Right.
And that's a disservice. We're building tourism, and we refuse to acknowledge that, you know, maybe the overgrowth of tourism is responsible for the death of the very resources that our economy depends on. But we won't house the people that carry the tourism industry forward.
Right, and it's extraordinary to me that the tourist industry doesn't embrace this process, because these are your employees we're talking about. These are the people that are providing the services that allow your hotels and your tourist trade to exist in the first place. How is it that we undermine and allow this industry to consume itself?
And they're living in there. A lot of people who are well-paid, you know, leaders in the tourism industry and in our own government are living in their cars. You know, how can you ask? It's again, I go back to the hierarchy of needs. How can you ask people to be productive members of the society when they have to worry about how they're going to get a shower every day?
Yeah.
You know, so
that's nuts.
It's the basic thing we have to concentrate on is how to. And I cannot sit at a table with people who tell me they can't build this.
Right.
That's not an acceptable answer.
No, it's not, and it's not true.
We have to figure it out.
We can do it. It can be done.
There are so many
options.
answers.
Yeah.
So
and
anyway.
that includes the zoning issues. It includes what is considered a home. To be able to redefine and be able to find a way to appropriately build small homes, tiny homes, without creating a trailer park situation.
Right. Yeah, there are tons of ways. I have had really, really positive conversations with the kind of developer or builder or visionary that comes first and asks, what do you know about housing?
Right.
And what do the people really need? And the people who listen to the fact that people don't want, fully landscaped 3 or 4 bedroom homes for $600,000 for their 1-child family. If you really want to make a workforce home or an affordable home, start simple. Build a post on pier, plantation style, 1 or 2 bedroom home that can be added on to later.
Right. As
your family expands or as your kids grow up. You can, either refinance your home and build an extra room or build it yourself, or landscape it yourself. Keep things simple, Those kind of developers that are coming and asking from the front end how they can meet our needs, I think are going to be the ones that really trailblaze this from here on out.
And scaling back the scope of the construction is completely appropriate. I have never understood why these developers come into this this environment and start pouring concrete.
Yeah.
And building a house on top of a concrete slab that's buried in the ground here. This is the tropics. There's all kinds of stuff that come into the home because it's sitting on the soil.
Yeah.
You need to be able to raise that, simplify the structure, raise that structure up off of the ground so that there's airflow, and change the entire way that you're building.
Yeah.
And our problem is that the builders that are here, that are doing have been doing the work for decades, they're just not doing the right kind of construction.
They're building for mainland investment needs.
Right.
That's why the investment buyer.
The decisions are made off the island, and that's the whole point. The structure of our decision making is being made by people that don't live here.
Well, our own law actually encourages that. Like if you are a developer and you want to build a market rate housing development, you are required to, a quarter of those have to be, again, I use quotes, affordable, right? So the developer is building for the market rate buyer because that's where the money is. And the market rate buyer wants one of those tract homes you see in Arizona or California. They're stucco and fully landscaped and concrete, all that. They're not building for the lower scale.
Right.
Those guys are kind of like an add-on. So, it's just kind of, again, the nature of how our system is set up.
Well, and there is, because of the paradise factor of the allure of that, there is an understanding that people from the mainland who have money want to come here to be able to have that lifestyle.
Right.
But that's where you bump into the carrying capacity, because it's not a manifest destiny. You can't keep building, you can't keep adding homes and cars, in this environment with this infrastructure. We don't have the roads.
It's really true.
We really don't have the roads, to support, 45,000 more cars.
Yeah, you're right. So, that's why it's so urgent. Not only is it urgent because we are all feeling the crunch of housing, but it's so urgent that we figure this out now before, we don't have endless buildable land. So before the land we have left gets covered with more homes that nobody here can afford, we need to figure this out so the land we do have can be used for homes for residents.
And the timing of this is really important because this is a process that oh gosh, this should have happened. It should have happened 15 years ago, and people tried 15 years ago to bring these issues, and they were stepped on.
Right.
They were stepped on by the powers that be. The good old boy network has stepped on it. This very television station, developers in this community have tried many times to pull the plug on a kaku. Only because of discussions like this. They don't want you hearing the things that we're talking about here because they want to be able to continue doing what they like to do. And that's pull resources and pull profits out of this community for their own benefit.
Right, yeah.
And so, it is, a political process to be able to change that stuff.
And the interesting thing is that, it's been a process over the last 10, 20, years, but from what I understand, things are speeding up, and the community is really a lot more educated on what their rights are, and when they can stand up and say enough. So we've been seeing affordable housing law be used in a not so productive way for the community, but a very productive way for the developers. It's been used that way for a long time, and finally the community is stepping up to say, whoa, wait a minute. This is not what we agreed to,
Just because you are calling this affordable housing does not mean that it's really affordable housing.
There's a state law, it's HRS 201H. It's a state law that it's like a fast tracking mechanism where if you call your development affordable and it fits in these certain boxes, you can actually circumvent a lot of environmental review, zoning law, the council. It's a state law, but the council oversees all of the decision making And they only have 45 days to make a decision on an application, or else it's automatically approved. So to illustrate what that means, there is a development called Makila Kai, which placed anywhere else on Maui, I would be in love with the project. You know, it was really, really, they were trying to bring the cost of homes down and build for what residents' needs were. The development itself, I was a huge fan. Except that they wanted to do it in Laniapoko.
The wrong location.
Yeah, in Laniapoko with septic tanks right near the ocean, which we know what happens when you inject sewage into the ground without being cleaned near the ocean. It really damages the reef, you know? There were so many problems.
Well, and there's a reason why, you know, that is a form of environmental racism.
Yeah.
Because it's how a project structured, you know, good in a different environment, but it's being put in that environment because that environment already has problems.
Yeah.
And rich people are not interested in living in that environment. So what good is it? Oh, well, this developer says, well, I can, you know, I can find a way to exploit it.
Right. Right.
And that's what they do. And that project is a great example of environmental racism.
Yeah, and the thing, because they call it affordable, they were able to get away with not doing an environmental impact statement.
Right.
They were able to, you know, only 45 days. How much time is that to give you to review?
No.
You know, all kinds of different cultural impact problems, traffic, you know, add how many more houses right there in Laniapoko without expanding the highway? We're just creating all kinds of problems. But because they stamped it as a 201H affordable housing project, the, I guess, knee-jerk reaction by everybody is to push it through. We need houses, we need houses. So we had people, and it was really an emotional day when you have people who are concerned about, you know, we had biologists and scientists up talking about, you guys can't do this. You can't put this many septic tanks right, you know, above the ocean next to Oluwalu, which is our oldest reef.
Right.
You can't be doing this. And then you had people with their kids crying that they need houses and this is the only chance they'll ever have to buy a home on Maui. And like, you know, it really tugged at my heartstrings to see that our system, state and county law, has pitted the community against itself.
Right.
And who walks away with money is the developer.
The developers. And the lawyers.
Yeah.
And the lawyers, you know, and they're the ones that are protecting the system.
Yeah. So we're learning, and the community is getting smarter, and a couple of things came out that I think are not going to go away for the next time these projects come. Is environmental review is not something to be scoffed at.
Right.
You know, especially when you're so near shore or a major waterway. Also, when you stamp your product affordable, what does that affordable mean? In that conversation about this project, it came up that, like, really your average workforce out of 25 homes can only afford something like, I forget, like 6. The rest of them were like 500 and over, you know? So I may be misquoting numbers a little bit, but the point is that you can't use a faulty system and use faulty formulations about what is affordable to pass a project and call it a win.
Right.
You know?
How many units was that project?
Oh, I'm forgetting. It was just a couple weeks ago, but there's so much going on. It was
ballpark. It's fine.
49 homes.
Right.
With the possibility, each of the homes, because it's on ag lots.
Right.
They're bigger lots. Each of the homes had the possibility to have an ohana built.
Right.
So it would close to 100 septic tanks in that small area.
Right.
You know, that's major.
Yeah, that's a concentration.
So again, we're getting educated. The community is figuring out what questions to ask.
Right.
They don't just cheer for affordable anymore. They show up and they ask, show me your prices.
Right.
What's affordable?
Right.
This doesn't work for me.
Right.
You know?
And
so,
the same mechanisms, the same, you know, culture of lenience. A past planning director in the county, that's how he characterized the culture of the permit and planning process in Maui County as a culture of leniency.
Interesting.
If you wanted to do something, you know, they found ways to allow you to do it. And so this project that you're talking about, hit the radar because there were a fair number of units that they're talking about. But what people don't understand is that the same kind of loopholes and manipulation also take place on individual private developments. And if you have the right engineer and if you have the right attorney, then they know how to manipulate those loopholes so that there are spec homes, $14 million spec homes there are thousands of these things, that have been built on Maui as one-ofs. Maybe one or two or three. We had for a long time a 3-lot or less subdivision process with deferrals that you didn't have to install, sidewalks, and you didn't have to, do any environmental remediation. So runoff into the ocean. You could end up building a $14 million house and never have to contribute anything. These homes don't even contribute park fees. Because the permit process and the discretion of the planning director and I should say the politically appointed planning director and the politically appointed planning commission have allowed this culture of leniency to persist. It is the good old boy system here in Maui County. It has been exploited and used for private profits for decades. And it is actively being protected by the powers that be, probably because some of what went on in the past was actually illegal. And these people are still trying to cover their tracks and protect their friends. Those are the fundamental changes that are needed here in Maui County, that's the milieu that I'm working in. Autumn, you're working on the more typical of you. You're on the ground. And figuring out what the people need as individuals and being able to provide that. So these financial thresholds that you're talking about changing, how do we support that process? How does the public support that process to be able to change the benchmark numbers of what's considered affordable housing here in Maui County so that it reflects reality?
Well, this is going to go like any piece of legislation through the process. We'll present a bill. It's a pretty basic bill, actually. It just changes the wording of our own county law, and instead of inserting HUD numbers, it will reflect back to our own Office of Economic Development, our local statisticians. So it'll give us our own, local department some control over what's affordable. But they use the same census numbers and all that kind of stuff. So it'll go through the process. It'll probably be referred to the Housing Committee, I imagine, and then hopefully the chair will schedule it. And at that time, stories of yours, especially if you've tried to buy an affordable home or if you've experienced the rental crunch like many of us have, stories like yours that really bring these numbers down to something on a human level will really be important. Because it's really easy, and I don't blame anybody. It's really easy to just default to the feds. The feds say this is affordable. We're just going to go with that, and we're going to build that, and that's easy, But until the council, the people who have the responsibility to change this, can understand how damaging those numbers are, there's no really political will to change them, I think. So, I will be putting out a hearing notice to the public. I imagine that Sam probably will on Maui Cause's Facebook page.
Will echo that, sure.
Council Member Cochran will probably have it on her Facebook page when it comes to hearing. We really need your support. All it takes is the political will and a vote of council to change it. So that's the biggest thing you can do right now. Also, in the meantime, there will be some 201H applications coming through. There are 2 more developments planned for Laniapoko that haven't applied for approvals yet. When those come up, every single time you see in the newspaper or on Facebook that there is an affordable housing project up for approval, you and I and everybody else need to ask, what does that mean? And if the numbers aren't good enough, that's our chance to ask the developer to do better. If you're going to ask us to either subsidize part of your development through our affordable housing fund, which is your tax dollars, if you're going to ask us to exempt you from really important environmental review, if you're going to ask us to sit in traffic for longer because you don't want to pay for the road to be widened, great. I might agree to that. But just tell me what your affordable numbers are. And if we're doing all that for a bunch of houses that cost $500,000 and $600,000, then I'm not going to say okay. And as the community, that's your call. If you are willing to sit through traffic for an extra 10 minutes, knowing that a couple, almost 100 homes that you and your kids and your friends can afford will be built, then great, let's make that decision as a community together. But you have the right to start asking what is affordable. And every time a development comes up for approval, that's a really good question to ask.
And these become an indicator. Support for this kind of change.
Yeah.
Is an indicator to me. So if there are people in positions, council members that don't support this, man, that makes me really question what the hell they're doing. Who are they representing?
Here's the other interesting thing too. It's not only on the council, it's also on us as a community, because development, any of this is a numbers game, you know? And I've sat in working groups when we're talking about what the needs of our affordable housing community are.
Right.
And we also have to understand that housing and construction here is a little bit expensive, When developers say that things cost more here, they're not just blowing smoke. It really does, Permits are expensive for a reason. We have Department of Education fees, we have park fees, we have all kinds of stuff that we need to pay. And
we have all kinds of properties that have been exempted from a lot of those fees.
Exactly. But if we all want things that are more affordable, we also can't expect to live in a Wailea-style condo, We have to understand that when things do start being produced that are things that something like I can afford, it is going to be plantation style. It's going to be a little smaller.
Right.
The yard may or may not be landscaped. The roads might be a little narrow. Things like this. We have to make concessions.
And
too.
and it's important to understand. Some folks have a sense that from the activist perspective that it's all about the little guy, and they're looking out for the poor people, and I'm not poor. Well, we're dealing with all of the various different margins, and this is why I don't understand why even the Real Estate Brokers Association doesn't get behind and support this kind of thing, because it affects all of those margins. And if you're dealing with a population that maybe if you make these changes, then good people who will be able to participate in the process better than they are, and that you protect, especially in real estate. The brokers are very vulnerable, I think, to a public perspective that there's exploitation going on.
Right.
And a real estate broker that participates willingly and knowingly in forms of exploitation is not being true to their mission and their charter.
Right.
And they're working against the best interests of the entire real estate industry.
Right.
And if we know that these structural loopholes exist within our system, and a percentage of the population of developers and lawyers and engineers and real estate brokers, there are a percentage of those of our local population that have been manipulating and exploiting this process for decades. Why don't the rest of you stand up and make noise about it?
Well, it's because we're too busy working 2.5 jobs to pay rent. That's why, The interesting, and I agree, we have to really change the system. And when we do that, when we change what's available and what's presented to the community, not only are we housing our residents, but we're also making better community.
Right.
Yes.
That's the point. That's exactly
the really
point.
interesting thing about digging into housing and what a good housing program and what housing a community will do. I was reading through Aspen. Aspen, Colorado had the same situation that we had about 20 years ago. They completely priced out their workforce.
Right.
If you were a busboy or a ski lift operator, you couldn't afford to live in Aspen.
Right.
And
you
it's
had to
not
drive
an
40
island,
miles.
but it's in the middle of the mountains.
No, it's in the middle of nowhere. Yeah.
So they really re-examined their entire, and they they made some successes and some failures, but I've been reading through their 20 years later report, and there's all these articles and everything. And the most striking thing that I learned from their program is that they provided workforce housing, but if you hit the lottery and you got one of those homes, you also had to make concessions. They were smaller. There was like only one car per household, these kind of things. But the people, what they were saying 10 years later, it was really inspiring that they didn't have to commute and they had all this time to be a part of their community.
Yes.
Because they only had one car in their family,
Right.
they spent more time together.
Yes.
You know, they lived in the same one-bedroom condo for
Right.
20 years, but for them it was worth it.
Right.
And it created this whole, people in their local planning commission ended up being local, waged workforce people instead of investors.
Right.
So you had your local busboys and your ski lift operators participating in the planning of their own community instead of people that were there just for investment.
Right.
And that flipped their entire community around. So that's the goal here.
And it is doable. Educating and understanding and bringing these issues to the public is the role of this show. It's why we do Maui Causes, is why it exists to begin with. And in the community here, we beseech you to support this process. We are here, this show is here on a weekly basis to give voice to folks like Rae Ness, who is working for the best interests of the county, for everybody in the county, everybody who lives here. It's about the people that live here. And that's what we are in support of. So please go to mauicauses.org, take a look at our website, take a look at what we're talking about, because you're going to hear perspectives there that you're not going to see in other places here in Maui County. Autumn, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
I really appreciate the work that you have done and continue to do. Aloha, join us. This program is brought to you as a public service by Maui Causes. Maui Causes is a crowd-funded media production group that provides media production services to a variety of environmental and progressive causes here in Maui County. Visit us on the web at www.mauicauses.org.